Kodshim. We are discussing the issue of Matan, Shemen, Ulavona. And we'll see that within the constellation of Menachos, there are certain Menachos that require Shemen without Lavona, others with Lavona. Some don't even require Shemen at all. But now we're talking about those Menachos, and we'll specify them as we go along, that require Shemen and Lavona. So you got Soles, Shemen, and Lavona. 3 ingredients. Now, we have what's called a Minchas Chova, and we have a Minchas Nidava. In the case of a Minchas Chova, everything is crystal clear, and the Soles requires what we call an Isaron, and the Shemen requires a Log Shemen. But now we have another category called the Minchas Nidava. And in that case, he can bring many Yisronim, which reflect his neder. He can take a neder to bring 1 Yisron, he can take a neder to bring 60 Yisronis. Now the question is, does that impact on the Lug Shemen, on the volume of Shemen that has to be added to this mincha? Meaning, is the volume of Shemen relative to the size of the Soles? And if you double the Isronos, for example, instead of 1 Isron, you have to bring 2 Isronos because that was your neder. Now you have to bring a second lug of Shemen, or do we say no? It's 1 mincha, and the standard for mincha is a log Shemen, and it remains a log Shemen. That's constant. So this becomes a machlokas tanoim in the Mishnah in Menachos. And I apologize, I forgot to bring the Mishnayos, the Kahati Mishnayos for Menachos. I wanted to, if you don't mind, but bring me also the Gemara Menachos, so we'll be able to, it's a lot easier to find. In any event, let's just again mention this machlokas and we'll try to get into it. Chachamim say every single Isaron requires its own lug shemen, meaning the shear, the volume of lug shemen is relative in a ratio to the Isaron. Every Isaron requires a lug shemen. So see if you can open up, if you don't mind, to the Mishnah Daf Peiches, if you can. And once you open the Mishnah Peiches, it'll be a lot easier to find the Mishnah itself. I had in mind to take care of this before we started, but I didn't take care of it. Now, according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, lug echad l'chol mincha. There is no ratio here that every isaron generates a lug. No. The Chaloshem mincha as an entity requires a lug shemen. You can have a kli, and you took an idava, a neder, to bring 60 esronim in one kli, because a kli can hold a volume of 60 esronim. And you will bring, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, 1 lug for the entire mincha, despite the fact that it has 60 esronim. And there's a certain compelling logic to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's position here, because no matter how many Isronim there are, this is only Chelik Aleph. I'm sorry. Yeah. No matter how many Isronim you have, they're all integrated into one mincha. The Torah says that per mincha, you need 1 lug shemen. Why should it make any difference how many Isronim there are in that mincha? So if a person takes an idama to bring 60 Yisronim, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he brings 1 lug shemen. Now we'll take a quick peek at the Mishnah, but it's even more important for me to see the Pirush on the Mishnah. But Peiches, the Mishnah, it's in the 10th parak. but make sure, he has a little different sequence in the Prokim. It's a parak called Shtei Midos. You have to go back to the beginning of the parak and see in the 10th parak if it's Shtei Midos. How does he begin the 10th parak? What does it say? It doesn't say Shtei Midos, right? What does it say?
Okay.
Oh, it's the 9th parak. He has it as the 9th parak. Here it's the 10th parak. Okay. Let me just see if he points this out here. Yeah. Afilu mincha shel shishim isaram. This is a quote of the Mishnah in the 9th parak. The way he presents it, it's the 3rd Mishnah in the 9th parak. Is the Chachamim, the Tanakama says, no saying lo shishim lug shemen. Rabbi Lezman Yaakov Omer, afilu b'mincha shel shishim isaran ein lo elo luga, meaning one lug shenemar, and he invokes the pasuk of Vayikra Yudalid lemincha v'log shomen. So in other words, every mincha, no matter how many yisronim it has, gets a log shemen. Log echad bilvad. Shenemar b'parshas mitzora lemincha v'log shemen b'doresh Rabbi Eliezer Yaakov shekol mincha afilu higdola eina te'una ela log shemen bilvad. Then he writes ein halacha kimoso, and then he says, why does the Mishnah mention 60 isarim? Why choose that word? L'fishad shishim isarim niglola b'kli echad. The maximum capacity volume of a kli is 60 isronim. The ilu yosef mishishim isronim tugunim shnei kelim. They'll need another kelim, and then even Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov will agree he's going to have to jack up the volume of Shem. Okay, now we're on the top left column of page U, and this is, to me, this was a chakaru. I mean, it just proves to me how little I know about menachos. I mean, to me, this is a shock. He says, again, there are maybe 1 or 2 exceptions to this rule, but pretty much along the entire coastline of menachos, when we require shemen, there are shalosh matanos. We will take the lug shemen, divide it into 3, and add it to the kli on 3 different segments. We can divide it into 3 at 3 different intervals or sequences of the mincha. We're going to add the shemen. I mean, in my mind, if you would ask me, I thought you put the soles in the kli and you add the shemen, shalom al Yisrael. That's called blila. No. There's going to be shemen before the soles, shemen after the soles, and shemen after you mix the soles and the shemen. A 3rd time you're going to put the shemen on, and possibly even after you bake. In certain cases, like a minchas mafer, after you bake the mincha in the oven, you're going to still add shemen. Rov hamenachos bos im hashemen, nitan behem shemen b'shalosh matanos. Okay, then. So you know what, Steve? If you don't mind, take a look here and open up to Ayin Dalet. Okay, then Ayin Dalet on base, and then we'll see if we can find it here. Again, keeping in mind the discrepancy in the Seder HaPrakim. So what are these 3 stages of putting in the shemen? Number 1, Hachelek Arishon, 1/3 of the lug shemen, nitan b'kli lifnei hasolis. You haven't even added the flour yet, and you're already pouring shemen into the kli. And the Mishnah says, this is, thank you, Steve, is Perek Vav Mishnah Gimel, Kol HaMenochos HaNasos B'Kli, Te'unos Sholosh Matonot Shemen. And He says matan shemen bekli kodem. That's the first one on the list, and then you have another shemen and a third shemen. We have what's called blila and then yitzika. We'll see what blila and yitzika mean in a minute. I mean, I didn't even look in the kahati here. He says, "Chelik hasheni." So this was we finished with the matan shemen bekli kodem. Now we're up to number 2. Now you've added the soles. You add a second third of a lug shemen to do the blila of the shemen with the soles. This is called yitzika. Yotzkin ala mincha liachar blilasa. You've already done the blila. Then the shemen is mixed in together with the soles, and you add another third of the lug shemen. Now, in the note here, he tells you how we derive this from 3 different menachos. In each mincha, 3 categories of menachos, the Torah teaches you to add the shemen. And we're going to combine all these psukim to indicate that we have 3 nesinos of shemen. Number 1, in minchas marcheshes, and that's in Vayikra Beis Pasuk Zayin, it says soles bashemen tase. So the word bashemen indicates that you're putting the soles inside the shemen. Shemen came first. Then we're going to rewind a little bit in the same chapter in Vayikra. Here I need a chumash, but okay. We have to keep these sforim here so that we don't, because no one else is probably using them. Soles. Now we're not talking about minchas marcheshes. We're talking about minchas machvas, and it says soles blula b'shem. So if you don't mind, Steve, if you could open up to Vayikra Beis, and your challenge here is you're going to look at Pasuk Hey and then Pasuk Zayin, but what your challenge is going to be is not to just find the Pasuk, but find the context of the Pasuk. So what do you have in Vayikra Perek Beis, Pasuk Hey? You have there Solas Blula B'Shemen? So what's the context? Is there any indication that that's a reference to Minchas Machvas? Oh, that's the opening words in the pasuk. The Mincha al Machvas, and then it says what? Solas Blula B'Shemen? Oh, so that's stage number 2. And then if you fast forward to Pasuk Zayin, you go backwards. Actually, we're going backwards to stage number 1. Marcheshes
and solas b'shemen.
Solas b'shemen teyosa. That the solas is being put into the shemen. So initially, we have the pasuk in Minchas Machas called solas blula b'shemen. That's blila. That's the second stage. And when we get to pasuk Zayin of Minchas Marcheshes in the same parak, solas b'shemen tase. Is that what it says? Solas b'shemen tase? And then we're up to adding the shemen before you put the solas in, and solas b'shemen. The solas is added to the shemen. Now we fast forward to pasuk Vav. V'yatzaka aleha shemen. And that's also Minchas Machvas, I assume. Right? Because the previous pasuk is Minchas Machvas. So now, it says the word karbanecha. Let's see if we can find the word karbanecha in pasuk Zayin and in pasuk Hey. Yeah? In both of them. We have a Gzeir Shava, Karbanecha, And then we apply the principle called litain es shel zu bazu, and therefore we calculate sholosh matanos. And in the language of the Mishnah, is kol hamenachos hanasos bekli. So we're talking about minchas marcheshes, minchas machlas, to uno sholosh matanos shemen yitzika ubelila umatan shemen bekli. He says, "B'tchila nosein me'ak min hashemen bekli," and that's called in the language of the Mishnah matan shemen bekli kodem lasiyosam. Then nosein hasoles olav, and then choser v'nosein olel ma'at min hashemen ubolel hakol yachad arei zu belila. So we have now number one, nosein ma'at min hashemen bekli. Then nosein soles olav. And then we do belila. Just 1 second. I skipped something, right? So first he puts the shemen, then he adds the soles, and after he adds the soles, he puts shemen again, number two, nesina shemen number two, for the purpose of belila. Achar belila, lasha b'mayim poshru, unbelievable. He is doing now kneading by adding water, let's say warm water. And we said that we're afraid of chimuts, but in the Mikdash this reason, and it's a carbon tzibur, is ofer. Now he bakes it b'machlas or b'marcheshes, depending on what neder he took. Eser matzos. He's got 10 matzos. Again, it's not allowed to become chametz. Li'achar shenefu matzos. Hoses es hamatzos lepsisim. He breaks apart the matzos. He makes matzah powerful out of it. The yotzek shemen al psisim, and that's yitzika in this mission. That's the third matan shemen. Unreal. I mean, if you would have told me this yesterday, just 24 hours ago, I would have told you this is like from the Arabian Nights. You know what I mean? You're crazy. Yesh me'achronim. Now he has a machlokes between the Mishnah Lamelech and the Chazon Ish. So we'll start with the Mishnah Lamelech. He lived about 3.5 centuries ago. His name is Rosnas. Anyway, he writes that ain't shir lechol matana misholosh matanas elu ubiyaro lemay peachas l'arbas hachas bilvad sheyetziruf log mibein shlosh. Exactly how he divides up the log into 3/3 is irrelevant, into 3 parts. He doesn't have to divide into 3/3. As long as at the end of the day, he added a full log shemen, and he's okay. That's the sheet of the Mishnah Lamelech. However, the Chazon Ish disagrees, and he holds that if the Torah requires a matana, then we activate the principle of ein matana pchusa mikezayis. And therefore, the first matana, when he puts the shemen into the kli, no saying kezayis shemen. Now he added the soles, he has to do yitzika, v'chein b'yitzika, kezayis shemen. Now we're up to the matzos after the psisa, after you broke them up into small pieces. Again, you can add a zayis shemen. V'eskol hashemen milvad shnei kezesim elu no saying matana ha'imtzosu bol imo es hasolef. All right, now the Chazon Ish has a major chiddush. Again, he says the following: Matan kli rishon nosen kizayis, v'chein biyitzika. Now, let's go back to our definition of Yitzika. Yitzika, if you recall, and we'll double check it here, was the third matana, correct? Li'acha shenefu poses hamatzos lepsisim v'yotzek shemen hapsisim al psisim v'arezu Yitzika. So Yitzika is number 3. So number 1 and number 3 are 2 matanos, and they each require kazayas. Now, he's got more shemen than 2 kazesim because he has to have a third matana, which is the middle matana, which is called blila. He says, "Es kol shara shemen bilvad shnei kazesim elu, no say v'matana hem tzois ubol imo esatzois." So, what is the shear of shemen for blila? He says, whatever you have left of the shemen, which, if I understand correctly, means even less than a kizayis. So for the first and the third matanos, he needs a minimum of kizayis shemen, but not for the middle matan. Then he writes that on the first and third matanos, osur lahosif yoser mikizayis kadesh limayit shemen shalablila shekain ikar mitzius hamincha tluya b'shemen zeh. The real essence of a mincha is the blila. That's the middle messina where he mixes the shemen with the solid. So if he uses up so much of his shemen by adding more than a kazayas for the first and the third matanos, he's left with a pishivka, a small amount of shemen in the kli for blila. That's not a good thing. Zman ha-blila, nechluku tanoim b'zman ha-blila, l'das chachamim. In other words, where in the sequence should blila take place? The Tanakama, the chachamim say, it's got to take place kodem shebolin es ha-mincha b'shemen, the achakach lochin v'ofen osa, that the blila of the mincha takes place before the afir. I mean, that's Poshup Shak. I mean, that's what we've been assuming all along. Das Rebbe, Bolilin Osa B'Shemen Rak Liachar Afir. I don't get it. Let's see if we can find this Mishnah. Matan Shemen B'Kli Kodem Lasios. B'Chalos Bolilon. Direi Rebbe B'Chachamor Misoles Hachalos to unos blila. And he interprets it thusly: Hachalos bololon the oson haminochos abos chalos matzos dainu minchas mafet tanur minchas machves uminchas marcheshes hablila shalahem naseis bipsisim shel chalos. And I'm getting the impression here that when he breaks up the matzos, which is called psisa, he breaks it into very small pieces. I don't know. That's the impression I get. Because otherwise, when he pours in the shemen, I don't know if that's called blila. Now he quotes Pasuk Dalet in that parak, Soles chalos matzos blulos b'shemen. Is that what it says? That was the Minchas Machmas, right? In Pasuk Dalet. So you see that it's matzos blulos b'shemen. It's already made into matzah. You break it up into small pieces, and then you add the shemen. Achomar min soles. Af minchos elu, which is minchas mafet tanur, plus machvas and marcheshes. Blila shalahem nases be odom soles. Shekasu soles chalos blulos bashem. So it's the implication is that the mincha is subject to blila when it's solus blila b'Hashem. He points out that we pass it like wow, so many chidushim. So das Rebbe bolin also b'shemen rak liachar afiyosu psisosa lipsisim. So we break up the matzahs into small pieces, and then we add the shemen. And that's how Rebbe understands the pasuk that says, "So as chalos matzos bluos b'shem." Now haksherim leblila v'yitzika. Do we need a kohen to implement all these stages of adding the log shemen? Ein hablila v'yitzika v'shar asios ad hakmitza. So again, kmitza is going to be the critical point when we have to introduce the kohen, but all these preliminary workings of blila and yitzika did not require a kohen. Again, you have to open up to the first pasuk in that parak. V'yatzak aleh shemen, v'nasan aleh livona. And right after that, in the next pasuk, it says, "Ve'evia el b'nei Aaron hakohanim v'kamatz." So the Torah only invites the Kohanim when it gets to Kmitza, but in the earlier pasuk, when it refers to Yitzikas Hashemen or Nesinas Halavona, no mention of Kohen. Umikan sherak mikmitza v'yelech tzar kahuna. And now Reb Shimon is going to turn it upside down, inside out. L'shitas Reb Shimon, kol asios hamincha enom ksheros ela b'kahuna. Any stage, any action that's necessary to prepare the mincha requires a kohen. And here we have a machlokes between Rava and Rav Nachman how to understand the shita of Rav Shimon. According to Rav Shimon, according to Rava, Rav Shimon argues with our Mishnah because the Mishnah establishes that we don't require a kohen until Kmitza V'Ela. So that's a simple pshat in Rav Shimon. However, Rav Nachman says, Ein kan machlokes. HaMishnah midaberes b'menachos hanikmatzos. Rav Shimon midaber b'menachos she'enam nikmatzos, kigon minchas nesachim, minchas kohanim. So according to Rav Nachman, when do we say that the zar is kosher and we only introduce the kohen as a requirement from kmitza and onward? That's only with regard to menachos and nikmatzos. And Rabbi Shimon, who says that you need a kohen from the beginning to the end, he's addressing menachos she'enam nikmatzos. Kigon minchas nisachim u'minchas kohanim, v'dafka minchas elu tzrichas kuna mitchilasan. Very interesting. Since the pasuk says that you only introduce the kohen from kmitza, and anything before kmitza does not require a kohen, that's only with regard to those menachos that require kmitza. But in the cases of minchas nisachim and minchas kohanim, which don't require kmitza, then we assume that the entire process from A to Z always requires kahuna. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop. Let's make a note. And we're up to Makom Hablila. Here on page Yud. So the only page we have after this is Yud Aleph. Am I right? I don't think we received Yud Beis. Okay, so I don't know if you have the time for that, but